I'm very excited to welcome into the broadcast somebody who's definitely been a fixture on the program for 2017. It is our legal analyst, the one and only Brian Goldfinger.
Goldfinger. He's the man with the Midas touch.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to buy.
Hello, Brian.
Hello, everybody. Happy holidays to you and your listeners. Thanks for having me in.
I want to know, what does the holidays look like in the Goldfinger household? Now, you got 2 kids, you got a 4-year-old, you got a 1-year-old, you got a wife who's a doctor. Man, oh man, I tell you, what goes on during the holidays?
A lot of yelling and diaper changing.
Oh, really exciting stuff, isn't it? Oh, that's good. That's good. But everything's shaping up well for the holidays. Do you get any time off at all, or no?
You know what? Now's a really busy time, believe it or not. Courts close for the holidays, but a lot of insurance companies like to wrap their files up for year end. And also, the cold weather hits, and there's a lot more. We see slip and fall accidents and a lot more, unfortunately, drunk driving cases around this time because there's a lot of holidays. So I'd love to say, things cool down around this time, but it's quite the opposite.
It's interesting you mentioned drinking and driving and impaired driving of any sort, because I was going to ask you about that. Now, we've obviously reinforced the message, and I think most people would, that the consequences can be grave, and it's terrible, yes. And there's no excuse ever to drink and then get behind the wheel, or smoke pot and get behind the wheel, whatever. But I'm wondering from a penalty standpoint, I mean, even if death isn't the ultimate result, which hopefully it never is, but I mean, there's a whole bunch of penalties that you could face, and real stiff penalties in terms of dollars and cents, right?
I kind of disagree on the drunk driving and the distracted driving. I don't think that the penalties in this country are frankly stiff enough, because if you perhaps kill someone or render them a paraplegic or quadriplegic, your lawyer can potentially get you off with a fine and a driving prohibition, meaning
Really?
You can't drive.
Wow.
That's it. We don't have... I tell my clients we don't have a Sharia system in Canada. I'm not advocating for a Sharia system, but sometimes the penalty doesn't meet the crime, because for accident victims, there are lifelong consequences dealing with their injuries. But for the drunk driver, perhaps they're paying a fine of a couple $100 or a couple $1,000. Maybe they get a few demerit points. Maybe they can't drive for a year. But after those fines have been paid off and after the suspension is done, they're free to live. Whereas the accident victim, they're living with their whole life with perhaps without the use of their legs or a brain injury. It's pretty significant.
Yeah, terrible. And you can check out Brian's a great website. I know you were blogging about some winter driving tips. I did see that a little bit too. What do you tell people at this time of year?
Around this time of year, well, if you're having holiday parties, don't drink and drive. We have some great ride-sharing services out there that are available through downloading an app like Lyft or Uber, or calling a taxi, having a designated driver. Also, around this time of year, people think that winter tires are a fortune. Winter tires are a very sound investment. They will help protect you and your family driving through, icy and winter slushy hazards as well. And you may also get a rebate on your insurance too if you purchase them. So that's always a worthwhile investment too.
Brian, can you talk a little bit about the liability on people who are having parties in their homes as well? Because I know that's an issue.
Yeah, so it's called social host liability. There's a case that went to the Supreme Court of Canada, the Demeraux decision. Unfortunately, it didn't go the way of the accident victim in that case, but there are circumstances where there is social host liability, meaning overservice and certainly overservice at a bar or a tavern. But the law involving social host liability, meaning hosting a party and serving alcohol at your party and not being a responsible host, it's very tricky. And it's so tricky, in fact, it went to the Supreme Court, and there are certain circumstances where you will be found guilty and certain circumstances where you will not be found guilty. It's all very fact-dependent.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
I seem to remember a case, and I'm not sure if it was a big case, but it was many years ago.
Witchell versus Mahoney. No, I don't know.
Something like that, yeah. No, it was, I think it happened out in the West Coast, and the guy was at a party. He got really drunk, and he jumped off the roof of the home into a swimming pool and ended up in a wheelchair, and he successfully sued the host of the party for his injuries.
Yeah,
Because there wasn't like a lock on a attic
No.
thing or something?
Yeah, it was a big case at the time, though. It was kind of like groundbreaking.
The
from what I
cases are
remember.
really fact specific. So, examples, things that the court would want to see is did they bring their own booze to the party? And if the answer is yes, then they're perhaps voluntarily assuming the risk of excess. Or if they didn't bring their own booze, were their booze served, and how were those booze being served to guests, and how are they being monitored? Okay, they want to find that out. And then they want to find out, well, did the person drive to the party or not? And if the person did drive, did the host make any kind of inquiries, well, how are you getting home? And if the person did not drive, then how did they get behind the wheel? They're so fact specific. Did the social host take their keys? Did they offer or voluntarily offer a taxi ride home? Where did the person go immediately after the party? Did they walk over to another party? Did they walk to a bus stop? Or did they go to another party and drink some more? So they're largely fact specifics, but these are the sort of questions that a judge in the court is going to have.
Now, we're chatting with Brian Goldfinger, Goldfinger Personal Injury Law, one of our absolute favorite guests of 2017, no doubt about it. Looking forward to having you back in 2018 as well. Thankfully, we have some good news to talk about, though, and that is the Toronto Raptors, who continue to play extremely well, Brian. And by the way, my father, who listens now because he downloaded the app, he actually got a laptop. He said, boy, that lawyer who comes on the show, he knows a lot about the Toronto Raptors. And I said, he absolutely does. I mean, the guy is just wicked smart at just about everything. They won last night in Charlotte. Tonight, they will take on the Process in the 76ers. But,
I'm going to tell you something about last night's game in Charlotte.
Yeah.
The three of us could have won last night's game in Charlotte, playing the Hornets 5-on-3. I'm telling you, we could have won that game. The Raptors, they're playing beautiful basketball. Last night, they had 35 assists, which is, it's got to be some sort of record. It just makes the game really easy on the eyes and pleasant to watch. I've always said this, too, about the Raptors. Winning in December is different than winning in April when it counts. But the Raptors are they've got to be one of the best teams in the NBA at winning in December. They're phenomenal. And it's great to watch. And a lot of people come at me and say, well, are they going to beat Cleveland? Are they going to beat Boston? Right now, I don't care. I like watching pretty and beautiful basketball. And that's what we saw last night. And I hope it continues tonight against Philadelphia, who will be without their star center, Joel Embiid, who is out with injury. So I hope it continues.
You know, what was it? Ibaka had a big game last night?
Yeah, he did.
You know what's funny about Ibaka is at the start of the season, at the start of the year, I wanted him off the team. He got the ball, and he was just a ball hog. He just jack up every shot, and it didn't make for beautiful basketball. He was a hole on offense. That's what they would call him. But nowadays, it feels like he's more comfortable in the flow of the offense. You actually see him passing the ball. You see him with chemistry to Jonas Valanciunas. And yes, Paul, to your point, he had a marvelous game, and he didn't have to play many minutes, so hopefully he's well rested.
Joel Embiid, much people talking about him, obviously a marvel in his skill, but as one coach once said, the greatest ability is availability.
Correct.
And that doesn't seem to be something that's going in his favor, but he is cool to watch when he's on the court. Good news for the Raptors that he probably won't play tonight. One other thing I did want to get your opinion on, because Sacramento was in over the weekend, where do you fall on this need to retire Vince Carter's number fiasco?
I am old enough, and I follow the team closely enough to remember the shambles that Vince Carter left our team in. He totally left it in shambles. So there's revisionist history. Vince is a nice guy, and he elevated basketball. I submit that basketball in Canada, and in Toronto in particular, would still exist. The Raptors will still exist, even if the Raptors didn't have Vince Carter, even if they held on to Antoine Jameson. That was the other player they traded.
That's right, who was a very good player.
He was good.
Yeah.
I submit that because Toronto is such a large city and is the center of commerce for Canada, the Raptors would still exist. I remember when Vince was mailing it in. I remember when he was tipping off plays to other teams. So this whole revisionist history, Vince was the greatest Raptor. He was. He was for that period of time. But he also had the worst attitude I've ever seen, and he left the team in a total state of disrepair, I would argue, for 7 to 10 years.
It's interesting. I don't know why we feel the need. Why can't we just look back and just be like, okay, Vince Carter, he was good. He was important for the franchise for a certain era, and then, he kind of moaned his way out of town, and they didn't get anything for him, and whatever, blah, blah, blah. I don't feel the need to go back and be like, have to retire every great player's jersey. A retirement of a jersey to me is like, did this guy spend 18, 19 years with this franchise? I mean, Vince Carter has been like a suitcase for the last 10 years.
I agree totally with what you're saying. If you want to equate it to hockey with Matt Sundin, I mean, he refused the trade from the Leafs.
That's right,
at a time when That probably set them back at least 2 or 3 seasons, maybe more. Very selfish. And if you remember, there was a time he was injured and he wasn't playing with the Leafs, and he went and played for Sweden, I think, in the World Cup or something. At the same time, he was injured from the Leafs. So, as great a player as he was at that time for the Leafs, and he did a lot of things for them, there's still that bad taste from Leaf fans. And I imagine it's the same for Raptor fans with Vince Carter.
Here's a parallel between Matt Sundin and Vince Carter. Both exceptional talents, both haven't won a professional championship in their professional league. And that is just a reflection on them being quote-unquote winners or not, and really wanting to win. I'm not saying that they didn't have big moments, but that desire to win perhaps isn't there compared to other players.
My theory with Vince Carter, because now he's Mr. Nice Guy, right? And he's
Super nice.
flashing the chiclets, and
Super nice.
he really reflects fondly on his time in Toronto. You know why he did that? You just hit on it. He went other places, jumped around, never won, and he realizes if he doesn't make good with the Toronto Raptors, he doesn't really have a legacy, quote-unquote, with other players.
I agree 100%. Now, here's my question for you.
Yeah.
Is Vince Carter a Hall of Famer? You see, you're thinking about it.
Yeah, there's not a quick answer on that.
Not a
for
quick
sure.
answer. I'm gonna say he gets in, because I don't think the criteria of getting into the Hall of Fame are that high. Yao Ming is in the Hall of Fame, if you'll recall.
Yes.
And then if you look at Vince Carter's international career, like he has a couple gold medals.
Jumped over the French guy.
Yeah. And they'll say for what he did for basketball in Canada, he's going to the Hall of Fame. So I think he will get in the Hall of Fame. If I had my own Hall of Fame, I would not include him. There you go.
Brian Goldfinger Personal Injury Law. And if anybody wants to solicit your services or basketball advice, Brian, how do they go about doing that?
Visit the website, goldfingerlaw.com, or you can email me at Brian, BRIAN, @goldfingerlaw.com.